Ever find yourself laying in bed, tossing and turning, and to your horror, when you look at the clock, it's 2 a.m.? And the harder you try to fall asleep, the more elusive it becomes. And you've even tried the time and tested shrink method of falling asleep, counting Sigmund Freud's. 1 Sigmund Freud, 2 Sigmund Freud, 3 Sigmund Freud, father, So we all occasionally struggle with falling asleep, a very common experience for most of us. In fact, sleep is so important that I ask my patients about it at almost every single appointment. And yet, it can seem overly elusive. Welcome back, my friends, to Shrink Talk with Dr. Robert, hosted by me, Dr. Robert, a board-certified psychiatrist. And in today's educational video, I'll be discussing some of the things we often get wrong about sleep, as well as how to handle even the most restless night. All right, so first off, let's talk about some of the things we get wrong about sleep. There are many misconceptions out there about sleep and how to fall asleep. I'll just run through some real common ones that I hear from patients that tend to actually be counterproductive. So often these involve beliefs. So our beliefs around sleep, which can be very, very powerful. A common one is, I need to be in bed and stay in bed if I need to fall asleep. If I get bad sleep during the week, I can just catch up on sleep during the weekend. A bad night of sleep automatically means I'll have a bad day. There are many others I'll touch on throughout the video and others that I'll hear, but those are the common ones that kind of recurrently come up. And these beliefs don't just stress us out, but they actually set us up to fail when it comes to falling asleep. And the truth to keep in mind is every person at some point throughout the month, week, has some difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep. It happens once in a while, sometimes for no apparent reason, and that's okay. But sometimes if it happens a few times in a row, it can cause a lot of anxiety around sleep. And then that anxiety in and of itself will keep us from falling asleep, which is an important principle to keep in mind. Anxiety around sleep often leads to inability to sleep. And then the second principle that's important to keep in mind around sleep is the more you try to fall asleep, the more elusive it becomes. So let's get into some sleep hygiene basics. So the first thing I always ask my patients is, how consistent is their wake-up time? Because if you're waking up at 5 a.m. every day for work and then you're sleeping until 9, 10 a.m. on weekends, that's going to really mess up your internal clock and throw off your ability to fall asleep, and it's going to really impede all of the other strategies. So I typically recommend waking up plus or minus 30 minutes the same time every single day, at least as best as you can. Of course, sometimes there'll be travel events that you won't be able to do that, but for the most part, at least 90% of the time, trying to hit that target. And then the next one is one you've definitely probably heard about. It's cutting screen time before bed. And that's like 1 to 2 hours of reducing or eliminating completely all screen time. And yes, that means no shrink talk before bed. I actually find that this is probably the one that people struggle with the most. I think once you get into the habit of scrolling on your phone in bed before going to bed, that can be a very, very ingrained behavior and be very tough for people to quit. The next one is making sure your environment is conducive to sleep. So making sure it's cool temperature, quiet, dark, and if you need earplugs or an eye mask, go for it. And the next one is limiting caffeine after noon. This one's really important because oftentimes people will have a coffee around 3, 4, or even soda late in the evening, and that can also affect your ability to fall asleep. And then just like with the caffeine, another thing that can interfere with your sleep is alcohol. And sure, people sometimes tell me, but Dr. Robert, if I have a drink or something before bed, I'll fall asleep faster. And sometimes for some people that is true, but it'll certainly impact the quality of your sleep. It'll fragment your REM cycles, make you feel more groggy in the morning, less rested, maybe even cause a hangover. And of course, it can also become very habitual for some people, and so they can, after a while, struggle to sleep without alcohol. And that's a pattern I see at times as well. And practicing in Chicago, I do find that a lot of people also use THC products to help them fall asleep. And though, of course, for some people that can make them fall asleep faster, for others it just makes their mind a little bit more wired and makes it harder to fall asleep. But in general, I also advise against continually using any THC product or any mind-altering substance for sleep. Because again, it impedes your sleep cycle, the sleep quality is reduced, and of course it can become habit forming. So then you struggle to fall asleep if you don't have that substance. And over time, that can lead to its own consequences. And the next 2 points really tend to surprise people. The first one is that if you can't fall asleep and spend 20 or 30 minutes, don't stay in bed. That's oftentimes the worst thing you can do. Get yourself out of bed to a nice, dimly lit area that's also quiet, soothing, and read a book, do a crossword puzzle, do some coloring, just meditate, anything but engage in screen time. And then the other point is use your bed only for 2 things: sleep and sex. And the reason those 2 points are important is because your brain likes to associate setting with mind state. And the more you struggle in bed, the more you're doing other things in bed, the more your brain starts to associate being in bed with being awake, being anxious and stressing about sleep, or just engaging with other things that are stimulating. And so you start to lose that connection of being in bed and falling asleep. And certainly over time, you can reestablish that connection by using your bed only for that, getting out of bed if you are having insomnia. All right, so what's that main saboteur of sleep? Oftentimes it's anxiety, because as I'm sure many of us have experienced, the more we worry about falling asleep, the less likely we are to fall asleep. There are some very useful strategies from cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy that we can use to help us navigate this anxiety. So step 1 would be a degree of acceptance, knowing that you can't control your sleep. But what you can control is how much you fight it, how much you resist it with all of these anxious spirals. So one useful strategy is recognizing that you don't have to control sleep. In fact, you can't control sleep. But what you can control is how much you fight it. Because like with any other anxiety, the more you try to control it, the more control it has over you. So I have to recommend to people that if they're finding themselves struggling at 3 a.m. and getting frustrated with themselves, of course, doing the strategies I mentioned, getting out of bed, but a useful approach is changing your thinking about sleep. This can look like telling yourself, okay, even if I get 4 hours, I'll be okay. I'll survive. I'll manage. Or even internally viewing it as, okay, I'm just not going to sleep tonight. And I'm okay with it. I'm just going to read my book, not sleep. That is A-okay by me. Heck, I don't even want to fall asleep. I'll get back into bed in a few minutes, but my goal is not falling asleep. It's just laying here and feeling restful as I'm laying here fully awake, as I'll be awake for the rest of the night. And oftentimes, surprisingly, it's that approach that will get you to fall asleep. You won't even notice when it happens. Because of course, if you're laying there thinking, I really gotta fall asleep, I need to get those hours, I need to be functional tomorrow, forget about it. You're not falling asleep. But if you're just laying there thinking to yourself, all right, I'm just gonna read my book for a little bit, then I'll go back into bed and we'll see what happens. But my goal only is just to lay there and feel relaxed. That's it. Enjoy the pillow, enjoy the quiet, and that's that. The next thing you know, you're waking up the next morning. Some other useful reframes are recognizing that one poor night of sleep is not going to end your life, ruin your next day. You'll still be able to function. And if anything, it will make it more likely that you will fall asleep smoothly the following night. And sleep is a skill to some degree. It's not something your body should do on time every time. You can kind of think of sleep as a cat, right? The more you chase it, the more it runs away. But you gotta lay cool, just sit there, allow it to come to you. It probably will. And all of a sudden you'll be purring in your lap. So as a quick recap, the first principle being sleep is not something you conquer, something you achieve. It's something you allow. The more you try to force it, the more elusive it becomes. Make sure to allow your brain to learn how to associate your bed with sleep. Stay away from substances and caffeine before bedtime. Stay away from screens before bed. And of course, be kind to yourself. Not being able to fall asleep can be very, very frustrating for people. Allowing yourself some grace, some compassion will invite sleep in. And since I am a psychiatrist, you may be wondering, what's my take on the role of medications in sleep? And worry not, I have a video on that coming up. All right, my friends, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I hope some of these tips around sleep you find useful and help you to get to sleep. Though I do hope this video didn't put you to sleep. And please like and subscribe, leave some comments down below because I'd love to hear about your challenges with sleep and maybe some things you guys found helpful. Thanks so much for watching. Until next week.